Hey everybody, welcome to Bestie Book Reviews. I'm here with my bestie Mandy.
And I'm here with my bestie Jessica.
So today's video is all about historical romance. So before we get started, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Mandy and I are still doing our Road to 1K giveaway, and we have some fun prizes as we try to reach those 1,000 subscribers that we're looking for. All right, so Mandy, do you read a lot of historicals?
I do not. But guess what, Jessica?
What?
I have five-star reads to share today. So apparently, when I do read historical romance, I pick good ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. I'm not huge into historicals, so these are like the best of the best as far as I'm concerned. Because there's been some that people have raved about, and I just can't get into them. But these are the ones that I could get into and that I really, really, really enjoyed. So let's share our favorite historicals. Do you want to go first?
You want me to go first?
Sure, go first.
Okay. My first one is called Redeeming Love by Francine Rivers. This book, oh, I love this book. It's also a movie. I love the movie too. Nina Dobrev is one of my favorite actresses, and she's in the movie. So highly recommend the book, highly recommend the movie. So incredibly good. So you probably need a little more information than just me saying so incredibly good over and over again. So this is about Angel. Angel is sold into child prostitution and ends up in a brothel as I think she is like late teens when we see her in the brothel, and she's out in California during the gold rush. And Michael is 26 and he is a farmer, and he gets this very strong message from God that he is to marry Angel. And so this is his story about how a very devout Christian man ends up marrying a woman who is in a brothel. And their marriage is not easy. And there's a lot of things going on. Angel is deeply hurt from all the trauma she's had in her life, and she doesn't trust, she doesn't believe in God. And so it makes things, you know, it's a challenge, but it is so incredibly good. I love the Christian aspect of the book and that God's love is redeeming. So, oh, it was fantastic. Yeah.
I found a lot of historicals that are Western tend to be Christian historicals. That's what I found anyway, because I love Western ones. And yeah. So Francine Rivers actually wrote the book that I told you that I read when we were seniors and we had to read a book. That's who wrote my favorite book back then. Yeah, the only book I ever finished was Francine Rivers. So when you said her name, I was like, that sounds like somebody I had read, and then it clicked that it was her. So good job. I love that.
I loved it. And it doesn't feel preachy. I mean, it's all about like God's love is redeeming. So it's not like you have to walk this model path to have God's love. So, oh, it was so good.
Yeah. Well, Mandy had that book. I have an MMF book for you guys. So I have Sea of Ruin by Pam Godwin. If you haven't read this, you really need to read this. I know it's popular, but there's still only like 2,000 reviews on Goodreads for this book. So read this book. So this is about Bennett. She's a female pirate, and she's kind of on the run. She's running from Ashley, who is this pirate hunter for the crown, and she's kind of also running away from her husband, who's trying to hunt her down. His name is Priest. He's this libertine. He's not the most faithful guy. He's got his hangups. He's a little interesting. She gets captured by Ashley, and she's being taken back to, I don't know if it's London or where she's being taken back to go on trial for piracy. And in the meantime, you're like, where's the husband? How does this work? Is she going to get away? Wait a minute. They're attracted to each other, but she's married. But like, there's just all these questions. This is historical because it is a pirate romance. Because it is Pam Godwin, it doesn't feel historical. It's just so good. It's emotional, but it's dark. Definitely check your trigger warnings. But it is so good. Here I'm borrowing Mandy's so good because it's just so good. But it's one of those, you don't feel like you're reading a historical. And everybody I've recommended this book to that has read it has absolutely loved it. So definitely go read this one. There's a lot of twists and turns. It's yummy.
I actually have that sitting on my shelf. I need to go read it.
I know, because I sent it to you.
You did.
I did. So go read it.
I will.
Yeah, Pam Godwin is like top tier for me. Favorite. Love her stuff.
My next book is called A Stitch in Time by Kelley Armstrong. This could easily be on the hidden gems list. I went and checked, and it has 8,453 ratings right now on Goodreads. Like, how it doesn't have like 50,000 or more, I don't know, but such a good series. So it's the Stitch in Time series. There's 3 books and 2 novellas. I'm going to talk about the first book, which is also called A Stitch in Time. So this is by Kelley Armstrong, and this one is about Bronwyn, yes. This is about Bronwyn, and she inherits Thorn Manor. It was her great aunt's, and when she was a kid, she used to spend time there, and she would play with this boy, William Thorn, who was 2 centuries earlier in time than her. So she goes back, and she is able to time travel again and sees William, and he is, so this is, again, I think I already said this is 20 years later. He has kind of become a difficult, bitter man, and there was a scandal, and so he has self-isolated himself basically to Thorn Manor. And he's upset with her because she disappeared for 20 years and he had no idea where she was. And she wasn't, like, she's seeing ghosts, and there's lots of different stuff happening in this book. It is incredibly good. I don't want to give anything away, so I feel like if I say much more, I give stuff away. But basically, this is a romance between somebody living in present day and somebody living 2 centuries ago.
There's a lot of
mystery to figure out how that's going to work out.
Yeah. And there's the side story, the things that are going on behind the scenes is very intriguing in all 3 of the books. They're not extremely spicy. There is spice, but they're not extremely spicy. That was the other thing I noticed when I was reading the second one not too long ago, but I was like, oh, I didn't even realize that until it was over. So
they're still good, though. I don't think you miss the spice.
You don't miss the spice at all. But it's there. It's just not as explicit, I guess, is the word I'm looking for. So yeah. Okay, so we might have already covered this, but I really love Western historical. A lot of mine are Western historical. So this is Comanche Moon by Katherine Anderson. So this one, I kind of went, is it historically accurate? What's the deal? Because you are dealing with Native Americans and settlers in this one. So I kind of hesitated with this book. It was written in 1993. So that was a while ago. I mean, Mandy and I don't like to think it was a while ago, but it was
for yourself.
What?
Speak for yourself.
It was a while ago. But it was written in 1993. So I was a little nervous going into it about is it going to portray this properly? I'm not a historian, but there was nothing that stood out to me in this book like I've read in others where I was like, ooh, I don't like that. So this one, I loved it. And from what I'm seeing with other people's ratings that were recent, they still feel the same way. So hopefully it's how I think it is. It's good. So this one is about Hunter, and Hunter is a Comanche, and he is actually biracial. His dad was white and his mom was Comanche, and he meets Loretta. Now, Loretta's parents were killed when she was very young by Comanches. It was a raid, and her parents were killed, and so she is still like petrified of that happening again. And so there is a situation where she's seen the Hunter believes that she is this woman of prophecy that he has to protect, and that has something to do with him and his future. And so he takes her back to his village. And this is their story. There's a lot of racial biases that they have to overcome on both sides, which was very interesting to read. And it was the way Hunter loves her, and the way it's a broken English, but it's a very almost like a lyrical English, the way he talks to her. Like everything is just the things he says to her are absolutely gorgeous. They're just beautiful. The things that he says to her, I'm like, where'd she come up with that? The author, because I'm like, that's so good. So this is the start of a series. I think it's a 4-book series. I read all 4. They are all 5-star reads because it goes on to like their children and their and how this plays out. So love this. This was just so good. Read this one. It's good.
Okay.
There's no brothels in it. I know you like brothels, but
it's a weird problem.
It's a weird, not current brothels. She likes brothels from the 1800s.
Historical brothels.
Historical brothels.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
I find that time fascinating.
Yeah, it was fascinating.
Okay, Jessica, my next book is called The Soul Always Remembers, which is part of the Beacon Duet by Georgia Cates. I just checked Goodreads. 230 ratings. That's it.
What?
I know.
That book is like, so good. We both read it. We both loved it.
Yes. 5-star reads. I'm pretty sure I have it marked as my favorite. Like,
it was on my favorites from last year.
Loved it. Loved it. So everyone needs to go read this because you are missing out by not reading this.
So good.
And if you do not like historicals, this does not actually have a historical fiction feel to it. When Jessica and I were coming up with ideas for the books that we wanted to use for this, she actually brought it up and I'm like, oh, you're right. That would be historical. Yeah. Because this is Caroline who's living in present day time. And she has been having these visions since she was 4 years old, like of the past. And sometimes it's like little snippets and other times she feels like she's almost living it. And this gets her diagnosed as schizophrenic. Her mom is just not a great mom. She's really controlling and just nitpicks, I guess would be a good word, Caroline, for like everything. But her grandma believes Caroline and doesn't believe that she's schizophrenic. I do not want to give anything away, but this is fantastic. You have to read it because you're trying to figure out what is going on in this book. Who are these people that she's seeing the visions of? And you almost get 2 love stories by reading this series. It is incredible. I've never read anything like this. Jessica, I don't think you've read anything like it either. And we've read together way over 1,000 books.
Yeah. And it's a duet. So you do need to read both books because they're both amazing. And I think it was 1920s? It was early 1900s, the historical part of it.
Yes.
Yeah. It's told in 2 different times. But yeah, so good. I'm using your so good, apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. You ready for my next one? I
am. Is it so good?
So good. we need t-shirts that say so good. So my next one is Morning Glory, and it's by Lavyrie Spencer. And I really hope I say that name right. That is a tongue twister for me. But this one is about Will and Eleanor Dinsmore. So Will is an ex-con. He had been in prison for 5 years for murdering, their words, not mine, for murdering a whore, is what they'd said. He murdered a prostitute, apparently, at some point in time. And we find out more about that later. But he has just gotten out of prison, and he is trying to find a job, and nobody will hire him, or they hire him on for like half a day, and then they fire him because they find out that he is an ex-con. So this takes place just before World War II. When the book opens up, he's working for someone, but he gets fired right away because they find out that he is an ex-con. And so he ends up going to town, and there is an ad in the paper. Oh my gosh, there's an ad in the paper. A woman has placed an ad. She is looking for a husband. And there's all this talk about crazy Ellie Dinsmore. And so that is who's put in the ad. And so he goes out to the house where she lives because he's got nothing left to lose, nothing to lose here, right? He's got nothing. And he meets Ellie. The town has all said she's crazy. She's not. She's a recluse, but she's not crazy. She's a mom of 2 little toddlers running around, and she's pregnant with her 3rd. Her husband had been killed earlier in the year while tending to bees on their property. And so she's alone. And so she is looking for a husband because she needs a husband to help her with the property and the boys and everything. So this is their story. I loved both of their characters. You know, she was afraid of everybody in town because of some trauma and stuff that had happened to her when she was young. Her mom had her out of wedlock, and then her the grandparents had basically punished both of them for it. And so you have that aspect. And so she became a recluse. And then you have his story where he's just trying, he made a mistake and he's just trying to make it again in the world. And it's a beautiful love story that spans a little bit of time, but love it. It's so good. It's so good. It's a really, really good story. And I like the time era that it is happening. I just wanted to take Will and hug him and tell him it was going to be okay. I did. And then I wanted to kick Ellie's butt and tell her to get in the car and go to town. Dang it, there is some shopping to be done. So, just great. So yeah. Okay, tell me about your next one.
Okay, my next book is one you've also read, Annie's Song by Katherine Anderson.
I love that book.
Yes, that's another 5-star historical fiction.
Yep.
All right, so this book is really different from anything that I've ever read. It's a plot line that I don't know that you'll ever find one like this again. So Annie is deaf, and this is, again, I don't really know what time this takes place. Like, we're still riding horses.
I think it's in the very early 1900s, if I remember right. Extremely late 1800s, or early 1900s.
Yeah, they're like, horses are still their transportation. There's no mention of travel by car in the book, I don't think.
Yeah.
And so Annie is deaf, and so her mom does not want her sent off to a school. She's very terrified of what could happen to Annie. And Jessica and I had little differing opinions on this because Jessica's like, her mother is horrible. And while I do agree her mother was horrible, I felt like her mom was operating out of love for Annie in the best way that she could given the time. Like, she was terrified of Annie having to go away and something happening to her. So she was trying to get Annie to behave and perhaps misunderstood a lot of things that were actually going on based out of fear and love for Annie. That was kind of my thought on it. But anyways, so Annie is deaf, which makes her family and everyone else just think that she's dumb, like that she's mentally not there because she can't communicate and she makes weird sounds. And they kind of just let Annie run wild, basically. And so Annie is out. She's a teenager. She's out just kind of running around. And a really not great guy, Douglas, pins her down and rapes her. And there are witnesses to this. And Douglas is just kind of a mean bully, so nobody really wants to say anything about it. But it eventually comes out because this had happened. And Annie is actually pregnant. Well, Alex is Douglas's half-brother, or was it stepbrother? I can't remember.
They were half-brothers.
Half-brothers, yeah. They're half-brothers. And so Alex just feels like really bad about this situation. And so he ends up stepping up and says, okay, well, I'll marry Annie and I'll make sure the baby's taken care of, because he believes he can't have kids. So there's like, this is kind of his reasoning for doing this. And this is their story because Alex begins to realize that Annie is not dumb. She just can't hear. And so this starts to get pieced together. There's also a maid, Maddie, who I absolutely loved in this book.
Yeah,
so awesome. It was a fantastic read. I always love it when the side characters are interesting and fun to see in the book as well. So yeah, that was the book. Yeah. Definitely not something, a plot that I've ever seen before.
No, and it's one of my favorites. I love it. I love when Alex because he starts to question why he's starting to develop feelings for her. And he's like, whoa, this woman doesn't have all her faculties, their words. Like, they use the word dumb where we would use something else nowadays. But, he's like, I can't have feelings for her. But then when he realizes that she's deaf, it's like, oh, it's okay that I feel this way about her,
Mm-hmm.
So I loved it. I love their relationship. So my next one is a Western historical. This is called...
Do they have a brothel?
I think there is a brothel, but they're not in a brothel. A brothel is barely mentioned, if there is one. I don't remember a brothel being mentioned at all. This is called The Substitute Wife. It's by Cici, Cordelia. And this takes place in the late 1800s in Colorado. And so we have our hero, Harrison. He has left home. They live on the East Coast or somewhere over there, over on that side. And so 4 years prior, he left to go work in a silver mine to make his fortune. And he left his sweetheart at home, his fiance, and he was going to send for her once he had gotten established and he'd made his fortune and he had a home and things prepared for her. So here it is 4 years later, and he sends for his fiance to come so that they can get married. So he goes to the train station to pick her up, and she doesn't arrive. Her sister shows up. Her younger sister comes, is on the train with her daughter. So this is Retta, and their little girl was named Adeline. And so she shows up with a little, she's a toddler. She's very little. So there's a note from the sister to Harrison. And she basically says, look, I have consumption. By the time you get this, I will not be alive anymore. And I am so sorry. But my last request is that you marry my sister and protect my niece. And so you have Harrison, who has been expecting this woman who he thought he'd fallen in love with years ago. And in her place, her sister has shown up. Not only that, he gets the note that she's dead. And so everything that he had planned and he had, prepared for her to arrive and to be a part of his life, that's gone. And so he does have some resentment towards that. But there's also the mystery of like, who's the father of this child? How did the father come about? Or how did the baby come about? Why do I have to protect them? What is really going on here? And so he does marry the sister, but we have a pretty tumultuous relationship in the beginning until they start to figure things out. But it was really good. I loved it.
So, Jessica, my next one is also one you've read, and it's one of your favorites.
Yeah.
This is the Surviving Time trilogy. So the first book is called Surviving Trace by Kalia Reed. This book is everything. So we start off in present day with Serene. She is engaged to Will. She is part owner of an antique store, and she is looking at this photo, and all of a sudden she finds herself back in 1912, and she is married to ATN, and he does not like her at all. And that is probably putting it mildly. And he quickly realizes something is up with his wife. And so she's trying to like tell him like, hey, this is what's going on. And so he agrees to try and help her get back to present time. In the meantime, we don't know where his real wife is. And this becomes just kind of like, it's their love story, but it also is like her trying to get back to present time. And then at some point, does she actually want to go back to present time? Mm-hmm. I will say, book number 2, I cried from pretty much the start till the end of the book. And I called Jessica and yelled at her for making me read this series.
And I told you to just keep reading the dang book.
Yes.
This is one of those series that, like, this is one of my all-time favorite series. This is top 3 all-time favorite series. It's one of those where I've reread it, I don't know how many times, 5, 6, 7 times over the course of the last 2.5, 3 years. And every time I read this series, the emotions are still there. Like, I know what's going to happen, but in book 2, there's a lot of angst. There's a lot of angst in book 2. And I still get that, like, oh my God, even though I know what's going to happen and I know how it's going to, work out and whatever. But there's that part of me that's like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And for Kalia Reed to invoke those emotions in a story that you've read several times, that is huge. That is unheard of. Normally, once you've read it through, you know what's going to happen and you don't get like the first time read emotions. But this book,
and to feel it for like almost all of book 2,
yes,
like that's a lot to keep up with. But ooh,
I just remember being angry. I remember being sad. I remember being anxious. I remember being happy and then angry again. It's just so, like, I know we keep saying so good, but this one really is so good. I've never found anything to compare to the series, and it really needs more views. It needs more. There's just not a lot of people that have read this series. It's just it's the best. So on that note, let's talk about my last one, which actually does relate to the Surviving Time series. So this one is King of the South by Kalia Reed. So this is, you can read this as a standalone. You do not have to have read the Surviving Trace or Surviving Time series to understand what's going on, but I highly recommend that you do, because then you're really going to understand what's going on. So this is the story of, hold on, Livingston. I just totally just went, whoop. Livingston is ATN's twin brother. And so this is his story. So he is he's served in the Great War, and now he has come home. Not all of his friends have come home with him. So his best friend was actually killed and did not come home from the war like he did. And his name was Miles. And Miles had a younger sister whose name is Rainey. Now, Rainey and Livingston have been at each other's throats their whole lives. They've ran in the same family, so they've known each other their whole lives. But like, she shot him in the leg with an arrow when they were little kids, and he's never forgotten it. It was in the calf or something. And it's brought up several times. There's something that happens to Livingston in the Surviving Time series, and Rainey's the one to help nurse him back to health when that happens. So they do have that time, but he doesn't really remember her during that time either. So there's that happens. So they have like this past where they've antagonized each other for years and years and years. And so when he gets home from the war and Miles is gone, he finds out that Miles made Livingston the executor of his will, or not of his will, the executor of Rainey's dowry. So Rainey is 28, and she's such a wild child that nobody has wanted to marry her yet. But this is the South, and this is, the early 1900s or mid 1900s, early-ish 1900s. And so it's time for Rainey to get married. And so they found out that they have 6 months to find Rainey a husband, or she loses her inheritance. And so that is what they set out to do together. And so it's kind of like the old South meets The Bachelorette. And it's really fun to watch it. There's actually characters that were mentioned in here where I'm like, oh, I need a book for those characters. So I really loved this book. I loved seeing the characters from the first book when we see them in this. But I just love the relationship between Livingston and Rainey, because it's definitely a hate to love kind of situation. They just antagonize each other all the time. But it was great. And it was great to see a strong heroine in that time frame. And she was headstrong, and that was a cool thing. So
that is on my TBR.
So I noticed a couple of days ago, and I don't know if it's still free, in the Audible catalog right now. It's in the Audible Plus catalog. So if you have Audible, you can actually get this for free right now.
I have it on my Kindle.
Yeah, I sent you that and said download it now. So it is free in the Audible Plus catalog to listen to.
I already had it when you sent that to me.
Oh, good. Good girl. Good girl.
Yes.
Okay. So that is all the historical romances that we have for you guys today. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button.
Yes, and make sure you check back on Mondays, Thursdays, and Saturdays for new videos from us.
Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next video.